My Hero Academia, Chapter 221, All for One's Parting Gift. This chapter was amazing. So much was revealed. There's so much we need to talk about, so let's just get right into it. So first of all, Gigantomachia. We're clearly seeing a real display of his power right now. Before, we've only got glimpses and implications of it. More or less, they've kind of been shying away from what he's really capable of. But we're seeing, immediately that, when he slams the ground, he causes, a gigantic explosion. He's so powerful that I think he might be rivaling, or at least is on the level of, the All Might that fought the USJ Nomu. So he's, possibly around, just on the strength level, around the power of that All Might, after his injury from All for One originally. So he's incredibly powerful just from a physical aspect, but we're also finding out that he has otherworldly stamina, so he likely can just keep going and not get tired for a very long time, which is making him way more formidable on top of his overwhelming physical power that he has. But on top of that, yep, he also has multiple quirks, and apparently he was able to acquire these multiple quirks without any modifications. So that's why he doesn't look like a nomu, because those guys were modified so that they were able to receive multiple quirks, but not the case of Gigantomachia. Although he does look different, so it's possible that he inherently is a heteromorphic type quirk that gives him the appearance that he does have, or maybe one of the other quirks that he inherited made him look this way, because he kind of looks like Hiroshima when he becomes hardened from his quirk. He kind of has that kind of appearance. I'm not saying that's necessarily what is going on with him, but they just share a similar aesthetic there. But regardless, this right here, this information and this display of power that he has shown is already pushing Gigantomachia to the close to the top of the power scale, in my opinion. I think this is showing that he's one of the stronger, if not one of the strongest characters in the series, at least currently. With the current roster and the way the power meta is right now, he's definitely at the top of it. And I even forgot to mention that he tanked Dabi's Blue Flames, his cremation quirk, which is a cut above the rest of the other fire stuff that we have seen. He just tanked that completely. It left a few scorch marks on him, but it doesn't look like it damaged him per se, more so than it would a normal person, because of course they would be melted by this. But Gigantomachia just tanked this thing and survived it no problem. But we're also seeing him jumping to go save the radio that he has, and apparently this is because it has prior recordings of All for One soothing him, I guess, on this. But this is all showing yeah, he is incredibly powerful, super stamina, super tanky, multiple quirks, super strength. But his drawback here is that he lacks the mental capacity to really take advantage of how powerful he is. He's more kind of has a guard dog relationship. But that also brings me to the other thing that I want to talk about here, is that we're finding out that Gigantomachia was All for One's previous bodyguard. So this is his right-hand man, essentially. So this is basically putting Gigantomachia on Yonko commander status here. So yeah, I think he's probably around that level of power if we're relating it to One Piece's power scale, because All for One is definitely a Yonko. I mean, he is the Yonko in this universe. So I guess this is making Gigantomachia one of his commanders, if not his only commander, because I mean, if anyone was powerful enough to obtain that role, it would definitely be Gigantomachia. Wow. It's also revealed that Gigantomachia has been around for a while, because it's stated that All for One stashed him away on this island, or wherever the hell they are right now, after he realized that his defeat at the hands of All Might was inevitable. So he just wanted to stash away a contingency plan, pretty much, in the form of Gigantomachia. And it said that this happened before All for One took in Tomura. So it's not exactly stated how old Tomura is, at least not to my knowledge, but it's implied he's in his early 20s. So this happened, I don't know, around 15 15 to 20 years ago, I'm assuming. I mean, maybe All For One picked up Tomura when he was like from like 3 to 5 years old, somewhere around there. And this could also mean that Gigantomachia was like one of the first nomus. Now, I know that it was stated that he didn't have any modifications done to him, similar to how nomu is, but I'm saying like he was like the first project possibly from All For One to try to make somebody that can contain multiple quirks possibly, or maybe he finally found someone inherently strong enough to be able to obtain multiple quirks through this manner. You know, it will be revealed more as the chapters go on for sure. I mean, we're going to find out more about this guy, but there is something special about him that allows him to have multiple quirks without becoming a nomu. Alright, now let's get into the Doctor, Daruma Yujiko. So there's so much that needs to be said about this guy, but first let's get into the quirk that is being used here, the black liquid teleportation quirk, although it looks kind of gray in the anime. So this is, as stated, the same quirk that we saw in Kamino, and at that time it was implied that All For One was using it, because he also goes on to explain how it works. He said he needs to have like an intimate knowledge of the person in order to do it, and that he can only do so many people, and that he can teleport them only from their location to him. So does this mean that Yujiko is using this quirk, or is he having like a nomu use it possibly, or was this his inherent quirk that he just had and that's how All For One has it, or maybe they're sharing it somehow, or like I said, maybe it's also another quirk that a nomu has that he's activating through that somehow. But more so, I think it's pointing at Yujiko possibly having this quirk himself. But you know, the other possibilities are, you know, viable as well. But also let us remember that in chapter 91, when Dabi showed up to encounter Endeavor and Hawks, Dabi says, "Hey, a little help, Yujiko," and then the black liquid quirk takes over him, and he teleports out of there. So at this time, we didn't know what Dabi was talking about. We just assumed Yujiko was possibly like another member of the League of Villains. But now we know that it is the Doctor. But that also brings us back to the point of that the last few chapters that we have seen have been taking place before the Pro Hero arc, the Endeavor and Hawks arc. So this is all lining up with that, because now we're also seeing how the high-end nomu wound up going to that place in the first place, because we're finding out here that it's coming from them encountering the Doctor and whatnot. So now let's get into the high-end nomus, because apparently the Doctor has 12 of these things, and if they're all on the level or above high-end, this is like an incredibly formidable force that he has here, not just for him but also the League of Villains, because as we just said, that he's slowly letting these guys off their leash for the League of Villains agenda, or just what he feels All For One's agenda is ultimately. So right in the beginning of this panel, like the very first one on the right, we see just high-end just floating in that tank, and then we're seeing the other high-end nomus as well. So we've got one on the left here. He looks like more streamlined, like a more advanced version of like the USJ nomu, almost like the way that his head is. And then across from him, next to the high-end nomu that we saw in the Pro Hero arc, is like a female nomu. I think this is the first time we're actually seeing like a female nomu. Before this, I don't think we ever saw one. So that one looks pretty cool. And then across from that, on the other side of it, on the left, we're seeing like a nomu with multiple heads. At least that's what it looks like to me. It kind of looks like Melzergard from One Punch Man, like the alien that invaded Earth at the end of that series, like around episode 10 through 12, if you remember that. And then across from him, next to the female one, is like a thick nomu with like no legs. So I'm assuming that one like floats. That would be pretty cool. And then across from him, it's like a dog or a cat nomu. Like it sticks out from all of these other nomus because it's the only one that looks like this. It's like small and it's like kind of cat-like or something. It looks like it has a gun on its hand too, so that's interesting. And then across from the cat, next to the thick nomu, is one that like looks very similar to like an Eva from Evangelion. like the head of it. At least that's what reminds me a lot of it. Also, its body in general just looks a lot like that. I wouldn't be surprised if Horikoshi was inspired by Eva with this design, because it looks pretty cool. And then the rest of the Nomus, it's really hard to make them out. But regardless, all of these guys are probably as strong as high-end or even stronger than that. So it's really going to be interesting to see these guys in action eventually as time goes on. I mean, we're for sure probably going to see like at least one of these guys on display in this current arc, because we know that the Liberation Army is going to go after the League of Villains, so they're probably going to use one of these guys for defense at least, and I can't wait to see that. Also, another thing that was touched on in this chapter was the Quirk-destroying drug that Tomura confiscated from Chisaki, and I brought this up in my chapter 220 review, because Tomura is shown holding the case that holds the Quirk-destroying drug bullets. And we also see him, you know, talking about the doctor. So I assume that he's going to bring this up to the doctor, because I'm sure the doctor can do something with this. You know, mass produce it, make it even better possibly. I mean, if anyone could do it, it's this guy. He seems way more capable than anyone Chisaki had working on his drug stuff. So, I mean, the doctor kind of brushes it off after he brings this up, but I'm sure we'll get more into that later. I mean, this is like going to be like a really powerful weapon for them to use against just not only the Liberation Army, but just anyone. Like, this is like make you or break you type stuff. If you take away someone's quirk, you might as well just kill them. You know what I'm saying? Alright, so now let's get into Daruma Yujiko, or allegedly, because that's not really his name. He says he just came out with it on the spot. But this guy is All For One's doctor. So, immediately we're seeing that this guy looks extremely similar to Izuku's doctor back in the first episode of My Hero Academia. And I'm thinking that this isn't a coincidence. It's very likely that these two characters are one and the same. Now, of course, this theory has been out there for a while now, but I think this is kind of confirming that is true. I mean, this guy, I mean, we're getting a close-up on his face unlike we have ever seen before, and he looks identical to the doctor that we saw, you know, tell Izuku that he had no quirk. So let's go into all of the theories that could possibly be tying this together. And then is that, yeah, All For One's doctor is in fact the same doctor that told Izuku that he didn't have a quirk. So it's possible that this guy is taking the quirks from like kids. I mean, that was like the big theory, is that All For One has like this like farm kind of going, where he just has this doctor take quirks from kids and then just lies to their parents and tells them, oh, hey, you know, apparently he has the bone in his pinky, so that means that he doesn't have a quirk. And those kind of x-rays and whatnot are easy to fabricate, so it's a possibility that that's happening. There's also like this other theory that All For One like goes out and hooks up with random women that have like the quirks that he wants, and that then he leaves them afterwards, and then the doctor picks up where he left off. So the doctor just, any time where the quirk would manifest in a kid, because we found out that throughout the series, you know, quirk manifestation kind of happens different with everyone. Like some people it happens at birth, sometimes it takes them a little longer, like maybe like the age of like from 1 to 3 it takes for them to manifest their quirk or something along those lines. So that's why the doctor comes in, he monitors the kids until their quirk kicks in, and then he takes it from them and just says, oh, they never had a quirk or something like that. But then this would mean that All For One is Izuku's father, and then we have that cliche storyline to go down. I don't want to get too much into that now because it's a whole can of worms, but more or less this is like the whole connecting factor here, is that the doctor is the same doctor from the first episode. So that's all you really need to know about that one. But other than that, we're seeing that Yujiko is very secretive of his identity, and as soon as one of them got close to him, he like retracted his chair back into the darkness so that they couldn't see him anymore. And this probably plays more into him being like a really public doctor, as we were just talking about. I'm sure they'll get more into that later on. But other than that, he says to Tomura that he hasn't accomplished anything, which is kind of true, but also kind of it's a little unfair of that. But him saying this to Tomura, I think, is going to further show that, yes, he does need to do something. And I talk about this in another video I've made about how All Might's death will likely be soon at the hands of Tomura, and I think this is what Tomura is going to do to show that he has accomplished something and to show that he is worthy in the eyes of the Doctor and Gigantomachia, because that was a previous issue that he had in this chapter, was that he didn't prove himself to Gigantomachia. He sees that Tomura is weak, and the Doctor pretty much sees the same thing. So I think Tomura is eventually going to take All Might's life, and that's going to show them, like, hey, look, I'm on board. I killed the symbol of peace. Regardless if he's nerfed or not, I did it. So, if I prove myself, and they're going to be like, yeah. And then also that ties into all the other storylines that I mentioned in that video. But more or less, I think this is where things are going with this particular storyline. So that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. There's way too much to talk about with this chapter, and I didn't want to keep rambling on and make this video like 20 minutes long, so I try to keep it concise as possible. But let me know what you think about all of this stuff in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. And if you like the video, please give it a like. I also have a Patreon. It gives you access to a Discord and a Q&A. And if you haven't already, please subscribe as well. Have a great day, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.